Hi guys, welcome to today's video. I've had a few questions about soil types and repotting Monstera, so I'm going to cover that today. The light may be a bit weird today. I used to close my curtains when it was too bright, but the quality was crap and it looked like I was filming in a dark room because I was. So I've used plants to shade the sun and I'm really not sure how that's going to work. So yeah, just bear with me. I'm just pulling dead leaves off my Adansonii. Look at that. Oh god, there's loads. This Adansonii in particular, like this isn't like a thing that's true of Adansonii, just mine. It either looks brilliant or terrible. Like the individual leaves, like some of the leaves look really healthy and some of them are literally like this. Like most of them are, that's not gonna. Like most of the leaves are fine, but others are not. Anyway, so yeah, somebody asked me when to repot Monstera, like do you repot as soon as you bring them home? And that is like a personal thing. I think a lot of people do like to repot as soon as they bring the plants home, and I totally get why. A lot of people, well, they're just worried about bugs. I accepted that bugs are just inevitable unless you're like a really diligent, sort of careful person that is really good at like keeping your plants dust free and stuff. I'm just not, so I just kind of learned that bugs are just going to happen, so I don't personally bother. I wouldn't recommend repotting straight away just because it can be quite stressful for the plant. So in the wild, plants don't move, they stay in one spot forever. So when you repot them, they're experiencing something that not only they've probably never experienced before, but it's something that they've not been designed to deal with. Now, a lot of plants have been in captivity. A lot of plants that, like house plants, have been grown in artificial environments. So I'm not saying that they've got the most natural lives, but still being repotted can be stressful for some plants. So I just don't do it unless it's necessary. And even when it is necessary, I still don't do it. That's just laziness on my part. But in general, repotting too often is worse than not repotting enough, because when plants are root bound, as long as they're still getting water and nutrients, they'll probably be okay for a really long time. But a plant that's repotted too often, can get a lot of stress and it can kill them, especially if you repot not like wrong, like you can't repot something wrongly, but if you're too rough or you put it into too big of a pot, then you can accidentally end up killing it. Even if I did want to repot as soon as I brought it home, if I was like worried about bugs or something, or just wanted it in fresh soil, I know some people like really specific soil mixes, and each to their own. I would still wait a couple of weeks just so your plant can get acclimatized, so we are reducing the stress for it in some way, so at least it's not in a new environment and being repotted. So just wait a couple of weeks, let it get settled, and then repot. And if you're worried about bugs, just keep it isolated, which you probably should do anyway. Again, like we don't all have room to have plants in isolation, especially if you buy several at once. If you can, just wait a couple of weeks and then repot. I'm not saying don't repot, do repot, whatever, but it's best to just give it a little bit of time just to get acclimatized. But in my case, I only repot when the plant needs it because I just do. So the way I would check would be, firstly, you want to check for roots coming out the bottom. We shouldn't have any on this because I only repotted it like 2 weeks ago. But I also repotted my variegated rubber plant. There's a video of it 2 weeks ago and there is already a root coming out of the bottom. So if there are roots coming out of the bottom of your plant pot, then check the roots, like take the plant out of the pot. The reason the roots coming out the bottom isn't that foolproof is that if you bottom water, roots move towards water, so you may end up with, rather than the plant being actually root bound, the roots just go straight down. The rest of the pot's empty. The roots just So if you see roots coming out of the bottom of the plant, just ease the plant. I'm not going to do it because I'll get soil everywhere. Do I have anybody that's slightly root bound? Oh, okay, right, so we've got roots coming out of the bottom there. So what we would do, I say like I'm concerned about soil going everywhere, as if I'm not sat at a desk covered in soil right now. So we would just ease it out of the pot. It's quite the face there. Oh my god. No! Okay. Okay. Right, so. Okay, yeah, there is soil everywhere now. So we could say this is root bound. We could. Oh, there's like a pub. This is quite exciting actually. Can you? No, you can't see, but there is a. Right, this is going back in the pot. So you could say that this is root bound. I wouldn't say it is. So if this was me, I would. I'm going to do it. I've already made a mess. Ease these roots apart. As you can see, like, so this bit is quite rooty. This bit isn't so much, but you can see where this is the soil it came in. And then you can see there's like a little ridge here, and this is the soil I added. It's not grown into that soil very well. It's collected around the bottom because I've been bottom watering, so the roots have grown towards the bottom. But what I can do is ease these roots away and sort of rearrange them so they can go into the same size pot. I love this plant. It was like £1 from Morrison's. Oh, what was this one I grew from a baby? No, this is, no, the one I grew from a baby died. So yeah, you can just sort of pull them apart, lift them up a bit, accidentally snap them. Ooh, light's gone a bit weird, a bit blue, oh well. So yeah, I've just sort of brought the roots up to the top a bit, and then we can take the soil that's now all over my desk and fill it in. So I've not repotted it in that I've put it in a bigger plant. Bigger plant? Bigger plant? No, that's not even the right word. I've not put it in a bigger pot. I've just like rearranged the roots. And that's a good way of not having to put it in a bigger pot. Now what you could do, if you don't want to put it in a bigger pot, is trim the roots. It's a bit controversial. I might get hate in the comments, but like you can, it won't, I'm not saying it won't hurt your plant, it won't cause irreparable damage unless you like trim them all off, but if you just trim off a bit, it'll be fine. Anybody remember where I was going with this? So yeah, bit of impromptu repotting there. So go over there. So yeah, some people would repot that. They would consider that root bound. I wouldn't. That would be sort of snug. When it doesn't want to be, you could uppot it and it would be perfectly fine, but also it doesn't need it. I wouldn't personally repot a Monstera that was in that stage. I wouldn't repot any plant, but I would advise against repotting a Monstera, because a lot of plants do this, but Monstera in particular have this thing about growing roots. They like to be snug in the pot. They don't like to have a lot of extra space. They like a lot of root. So, which makes sense because they are a plant that uses their roots to keep themselves secure. You know, they do the whole aerial root climbing trees thing, and they don't like to be unstable. We're not here to judge. So if they do feel that there is too much room in the pot, too much soil, they're too damp, they will just grow roots until they're like perfectly stable and then grow leaves. Now, I don't know if that's how they actually think. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's not, but that is what I've observed, and it's what a lot of people have seen happen. You put your Monstera in a big pot that's really too big for it, and yet they could die of root rot if you overwater, but Monstera you can overwater them. But Monstera, I found, they last longer. They won't die immediately if you overwater them. Then, you know, they'll last longer than a lot of other plants. But they will do this thing where they grow roots and roots and roots before they concentrate on growing leaves. So it is worth thinking about if you want leaves. However, you know, the bigger the root system, the bigger the leaves. So if you're patient. And also, if you are an overwaterer, beware putting it in a really big pot, because you're just asking for trouble. Monstera are also one of those plants that do quite well if they are sort of really full on root bound. They deal with it quite well. They do grow more slowly, I've noticed. My giant Monstera, she was quite badly root bound, and I thought she'd stopped growing because of it, but I didn't have time to repot it. I've repotted her since, but she did put out a leaf, but it was massive. If you see on my Instagram, like, it's a massive leaf. I think I put it in like 2 videos ago. It's huge, and I don't know if that's anything to do with it being root bound, but it definitely grew slower, and then it put out this big leaf. Being root bound isn't like a death sentence. It's not something that will kill your plant overnight, if at all, as long as you sort of keep on top of getting nutrition and water into it. It's harder to get the plant to retain water if there's not soil for it to retain, so you might have to soak it rather than just give it a quick top water, but it won't kill it. I mean, it could eventually, but it's not like a really big deal. If you can't get around to repotting your plants, it's fine. They will probably be fine. I mean, especially if they've got, which they should have, drainage holes in the bottom, they'll just grow through the drainage holes. Like, it's totally fine, so don't panic about that. The other thing I got asked about was the soil that I use for my Monstera. It wasn't my Monstera, it was my Golden Dragon, but I use the same thing. So houseplant soil is one of those things you could really go all out, or you could do the absolute bare minimum. What I would advise is finding something that works for you rather than the plant. You want something that works for you. So you can buy, my local garden centre has started doing like, you know, you can get an allocation mix, you can get a Monstera mix, and all these different ones. And I think it's great if you're one of those really organised people that really like looks after your plants in like a really sort of not like scientific, but like a really well organised way. Like, that's a really good way of doing it. I'm more I'm going to use the word intuitive because I don't want to use the word lazy, but so what I found works is having a soil that retains water but also has good drainage, because it means I don't really need to worry. I don't worry about overwatering at all, because that's not going to be a thing, but I don't panic too much about my plants drying out, because there's a lot of moisture retaining materials in them. And I also like to up the worm castings because I'm not so good at remembering to fertilise. So I've got a couple of videos on my the mix that I use, but I also don't measure it. It's, when I say it's intuitive, it really is. It's literally like, I don't weigh anything, I just tip it in. I always start with a block of coir. Now, I mentioned in a previous video, there are different kinds of coir. This brick size, this is like a standard coir size, but you can get them which are the same this way, but they're thinner, they're more compressed, like half the size, I would say. Avoid. They work perfectly fine, but they take ages to absorb the water, whereas these take minutes. So I start with one of these, see how much coir I've got in, tip in a bit of orchid bark to just generally about equal parts. If you are an underwaterer, use less, because orchid bark doesn't retain much water, whereas coir really does. So when you add the water to coir, you can actually squeeze the water out of it, and you can see how much water it retains, and it is a lot. Then I add perlite. Perlite does retain water, but also creates air pockets. So you get, it's good for both underwaterers and overwaterers because it creates air pockets, but it absorbs water. We love perlite. Wear a mask though, because the dust is not good for you. And it's generally about equal amounts, but I would just adjust. I say adjust the level of coir. I always use this much coir, but use less perlite and orchid bark if you are, right, use less. If you're an overwaterer, use more orchid bark and perlite. If you're an underwaterer, use less. And then I add in worm castings. So they come in these little bags. You normally get a bag like this. This is 2 litres. I would normally add a litre to... Okay, I have no idea how much this is, but a standard block of coir and then a litre of worm castings. And then a bit of charcoal. Now charcoal is quite expensive and you don't get a lot of it, so I just use a bit. So charcoal is just to, it absorbs impurities. You know how when people get poisoned and alcohol poisoning and stuff, they sometimes give you charcoal. I don't know if that's true anymore, if that's like what they used to do, but it can neutralize bad things. So that's why I put a bit in, but I just put a bit in because it's expensive. I should probably put more in, but you know, I'm tight. Sometimes I don't put it in at all if I haven't got any. So yeah, but I really don't measure. I just add it until it's got like until it looks like soil. The issue you would run into would be that it was either too dense or too airy. It's unlikely to be too dense if you're adding perlite and orchid bark. More if you find that it's retaining too much water, and you'd know that if it's still soaking wet after like a week or so, then you need to add more perlite and orchid bark. But you're more likely to run into the problem of it drying out too quickly, in which case add more coir. But since so many people are more likely to overwater than underwater, it tends to work out okay. And I use that mix on all my plants. Everything from succulents to peace lilies, they all get the same soil, because even though they have different requirements, it seems to work fine for me, for like my watering style. And it means that I know kind of which plants I can forget about. So like that Dracaena that I just unpotted, I know like I can let that dry out. In fact, it's preferable to let that completely dry out. So I do, but I know that will take quite a while. Like I can go like at least a month without watering it and it will be absolutely fine. And I like knowing that, because at least once a month I will be like, right, I'm going to check all my plants need watering, but I don't need to do it any more than that. Whereas other plants, so like my dragon scale, I check that much more regularly, sort of weekly. But even then I know it's not going to be completely bone dry for a good long while, so I don't need to panic about it, because there will be water stored in the perlite, so it will be able to sort of draw it out. Nothing terrible is going to happen to it unless I really leave it. And then it's brilliant for like this Aglaonema. So Aglaonema don't like to dry out, but they can tolerate it. They're like a beginner's Calathea. I actually prefer them. I do still like my Calathea, but I just find we're currently not gelling. I'm not liking this spider mites thing that they do. They are almost impossible to get rid of pests on, and I find it so stressful because I get rid of pests on everything. Like I had thrips on my dragon scale and my Adansonii, and I got rid of them and they didn't come back. You can't seem to do that on Calathea. You cut all the leaves off and everything's gone, and then 2 minutes later they've got them again, and I'm like, I'm sick of it. So I think we're gonna move away, and then we're gonna stick with the Aglaonema. God, you are extremely dusty. She's been in the dark, which is why she's not looking her best, but she's going through a growth spurt at the moment. She was repotted for the first time in about 2 years, the last couple of weeks ago, so she's looking good. But yeah, so Aglaonema like to be kept moist, they don't like to dry out, but this soil type just really seems to suit her, because it stays wet, it stays quite damp for a decent amount of time, and it takes a long time to actually fully dry out, but it's never like sopping, it's not dense. It just seems to work really well. The only issue I have with this soil mix is that it's messy. Having said that, it doesn't stain your carpet, you can just vacuum it up, but you will be vacuuming wherever. I spilt soil on the floor the other day, and I like to have the house tidy on a Saturday, so when I sit down with my glass of wine on a Saturday night, I know the house is all tidy, and there was soil on the floor and I hadn't got around vacuuming. So I was doing a split shift on Saturday, so I ran home, vacuumed, and I was going to get in the shower, and I got in the shower to get dressed for my second shift. And when I was coming back in, I just caught my string of hearts, and there was soil everywhere, and I was like, oh, I'd spent all day like, oh, all I need to do, because I'd cleaned the rest of the house, I just needed to do the floors, and I got it done, and I was like, yay! And then there was soil all over the floor again, and I was like, bloody plants. I can't really begrudge my string of hearts because she almost died. Like, I don't know why. I don't think she likes being in this room. I'm not moving her. She'll have to get used to it. So I had to chop all the vines. She was really long, but she just like, it was like she dried up. It was really strange. Maybe she did just dry up. So I chopped the vines off and she's grown back really well, but then she basically just fell out of a pot, and because it's so crumbly, it just goes everywhere. But yeah, that's the only downside. It's something you just sort of have to get used to. You sort of work out yourself what works and what doesn't, and you can always just add more coir or more perlite in. You know, just stick it on top and mash it in with a chopstick. It's not an exact science. In the wild, the substrate plants are in will change all the time. Leaf litter will build up. You might get like silt from a river flooding. It changes all the time, so they are sort of more adaptable than you'd think. As long as they're getting the water and the nutrients that they need, you'll be fine. And if, like me, you're not so brilliant at remembering to fertilise, you can add the worm castings into the soil and you don't need to think about that anymore. Maybe add more in 6 monthly or even yearly and you'll probably be fine. I feel like I've spoken for 25 minutes about like nothing, but I just wanted to sort of ease people's minds that Monstera in particular, and a lot of like the cheaper philodendrons, like the more common ones that you likely to get hold of, they aren't fussy about soil mix. They're more fussy about getting the water and the nutrients that they need. So as long as the soil that they're in sort of matches your watering style or complements your watering style, you will be fine. If you just want to go to the shop and buy some houseplant potting soil, or even like outside, I wouldn't advise getting outside soil, just because it would be so dense, because soil dries out so much quicker outside because of the wind, so it won't retain water. But if that's all you can afford or all you can get your hands on, that's, in all honesty, it will probably be fine. It's a medium for your plants to grow in, as long as you adapt your watering and feeding and stuff to the soil. You know, if it stays dense a long time, you might need to dry it out with a hairdryer, or it's unlikely, or put it somewhere where it'll dry out, not water it as often as you might want to. As long as you sort of are aware of the properties of the soil and can adapt your care accordingly, it will probably be fine. You can put your plant in like the best, most high quality soil that's possible. If you're over or under watering it, your plant will still be fucked. Like, I just don't want you to panic about not having the right stuff. When it comes to repotting, less is definitely more. Don't repot, or I advise don't repot unless your plant needs it. It's largely pointless and you're more likely to hurt your plant. Some plants some plants are better at being repotted than others. Peace lilies hate it and I have no idea why. Monstera genuinely don't seem to give a shit. But you know, the root thing is an issue if you like your plant to grow leaves. Yeah, just be aware of that. I felt like this was really rambly because I was a bit thrown about throwing soil all over my desk from the Dracaena. I didn't quite realise how root bound she would be. Not that she was root bound, but you know what I mean? Like, I didn't realise there would be that many roots around the bottom. So that was a bit of an impromptu thing. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. And I will see you next week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. I didn't have my microphone on. Sorry about the crap sound quality. Bye.